like voice acting?
Well, my main shtick is that I add lyrics to video game tunes, and that involves different voices at times. I recently did a Schoolhouse Rock parody that's coming out soon, and like, you know that Conjunction Junction voice, that guy with like the weird bubble in his throat, like I'm just a bill. Like you have to do this weird voice face to do it. It's weird. That's pretty much all I do, is just make strange faces and hope no one ever sees them except you guys. But no, like I do. I actually was in one educational video game you've never heard of called the McLaren Adventures that was like created by my undergrad. Hey, there's a connection. My undergrad school, University of Oklahoma, they made this educational video game, and I played Boris, the German doctor who talks like this, even though Boris is kind of a Russian name. And it was like, that's pretty much, in terms of voice acting per se, all I've done. But we've both basically been paid and had some modicum of success using our voices to express characters that are not us. So that's both where we line up, and also why we're not completely unqualified to be up here speaking to you. Should we take some questions?
Yeah, sure. Start out.
I have like 600 questions because I like voice acting.
Well, we have 600 minutes with no Mark Meer, so go.
Well, okay. What would your suggestion be to start your own, like voice? What do you call it when you have like a
Like a reel?
yeah, for voice reel, acting reel, voice reel. How do you start that? What do you do for that? I've always been like stumped on if I should do like little minute segments or if I should do longer segments of one different voice, or how many voices should you add to a voice reel? Just lots of.
Yeah. I think if you want to get into character voice acting, the best idea would be to do a bunch of little snippets showing sort of your range as a voice actor, a lot of different characters.
Should it be like different monologues, or should I pick something from like a show, or like what would you suggest?
Yeah, they could be original monologues. I mean, you could even just do one script and take the first sentence will be in one voice, and then cut to the next character is reading, and just keep it that way. So it's, you want to keep it fairly short, because if you want to give it to a prospective agent, they don't want to sit there and listen to 10 minutes.
Right.
If you gave them 1 minute of that encompassed 6 or 7 different characters, then they get an idea, oh yeah, this person could be cast in this or that or the other thing. Yeah.
And I mean, I've heard a couple of voice acting reels. I've never personally done one, but I dated a girl who was a voice actor, both character and for commercial. So here's what I know, just to kind of like this little bit of nugget of what I know. That production values don't hurt when it comes to a reel. Like, yes, you can just do, here's the voices I can do, but like I've heard reels where the atmosphere that would be accompanying this voice is there as well. Apple loops, background noises, stuff like that. I keep thinking it's Mark Meer. It's not. Oh, here he is!
And the number one thing is always be on time.
So we just got our first question, and
Yes.
we feel that you probably have the best answer. So
Yes.
would you repeat it?
Yeah, my question was, how can you get started on making a demo reel for voice acting? Because I'm always stumped on, like I've asked them, and they give me some tips, but I'm always stumped where to start, how many voices I should use, if I should make my own monologue, if I should use things that already exist, and I don't really know where to begin.
Well, there are a number of options, and I know people who have done this, who put together, my wife actually, put together her demo tape, just using made-up lines, and just things that had the flavor of, say, a science fiction game, a fantasy game. And she actually was fortunate enough that a friend of ours has a sound studio and had a bunch of public domain music that he also layered in the background and that sort of thing. I have known people that have just done like lines from commercials, lines from existing movies, and essentially you don't have to worry about a monologue. They basically want to hear a sentence or two in each voice. And these days, actually, while I do a variety of voices and things like that, they're usually most interested in your natural voice. What does your natural voice sound like? What's the bass line? And then if you can do accents, if you can do a variety of character voices, then worry about those. But again, a sentence or two in each voice is probably all you're going to need.
Would you start with like, hi, my name is Alicia, whatever, and then
Yeah, you're gonna slate yourself at the top
so
of.
you slate it, and then you can start with your voices, I guess?
Yeah. So
How
basically.
long should it be usually?
Generally never more than, say, 3 to 5 minutes, because that's all they're going to listen to. Like, you can make a half-hour long one if you like, but you're the only one who's going to hear the whole thing.
That would be boring.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Hi, when you're speaking in a voice that is like not naturally your own, does it kind of get hard on your throat after a while?
It can. For example, when we were doing the Vorcha, for Mass Effect, which are mostly screaming and screeching, we would always save those till the end of the day. And sessions for Mass Effect and on Dragon Age, pretty much every BioWare game I've worked on, never more than 4 hours long. Because, especially if you're doing a single character for the entire session. Because they don't want your voice to get tired and sound slightly different at the end of the session than it does at the beginning. They want consistency all the way through. So yeah, it can, depending on the voice. I'm probably not using a particularly good technique for the Vorcha, aside from screaming with a bit of water in my mouth. And that's, yeah. There are probably easier ways to do the Vorcha. I picked the hard way.
Mark?
Hello?
One question I have is, when you look at a character, do they give you like an image of the character, or just like a description and that's how you form the voice?
In large measure, you're going in blind. You might have a description, but not much else to go on. I was lucky enough that I started working on the Mass Effect games like in the concept art stage, and so when I was first doing Shepard, for example, they had an actual picture of the default Shepard because Mark Vanderloo had been hired early in the process, the guy who Shepard is based on, the physical Shepard. And so yes, I did have, this is a picture, this is what Commander Shepard looks like. That said, of course, that's not necessarily what Commander Shepard looks like, because you can make Commander Shepard look like whatever you want. So there were some alien races. Again, as I mentioned, I was working on Mass Effect before I was actually cast as Commander Shepard. I was actually hired to develop sound sets for all the aliens. I was the guy who sort of determined, Solarians kind of sound like Steve Buscemi, and and the Bolus have that little wheezy sound. And there were some things early in the process that got discarded, like their Turians, for example. I had suggested because of their mouth structure that they had sort of like a little clicking noise when they talked, or like at the beginning or end of sentences. But because Garrus was such a main character, you would have heard that a lot. And for example, if there'd been a Bolus who was a companion character, they probably wouldn't have had the, in between every sentence, because if you had to listen to that for a long time, it might get a little tiresome. But because Bolus were sort of just sprinkled throughout the game, they decided to keep that bit. And Turians, I think, Turians actually just ended up being a filter. I don't think that there was anything that was actually being done. Same with Solarians, actually. I sort of naturally sped up my voice and made it higher when I was doing Solarians, but they discovered that not all actors could do that necessarily, or do it consistently. So Solarians ended up just being sped up by the technicians and knocked up a pitch or two.
This might be go to the whole panel. What are some like the favorite voices that you've done, that you most enjoy doing?
Gentlemen.
The thing is, for me, thank you. This is in from the police walkie-talkie that we have here. For me, there's actually a disconnect between the favorite voices that I can do and the ones I do best, because sometimes it's just wanting so bad to nail it. Like I was actually recently developed the Schoolhouse Rock Conjunction Junction guy, and like you talked about, it hurts after not very long of singing like this guy, because it's like you have to create this shape in the back of your throat that doesn't exist naturally, and it's like, I'm just like, oh wait, here we go. Back in the 90s when you bought a new system, it was basically ready to go. And you gotta like do this thing back there. It's like a bubble of milk in your throat that you have to like force to be there. It's abstract, but also I really love doing Homestyle Wano. It's probably one of my favorites. Because to do it, you sort of have to have this smile in your whole body to do it. So that's one of my faves. Oh no, quick! Turn it down.
Yeah, working mic is actually also a good way of becoming a voice actor.
Is that one not working at all?
Not at all.
Right.
So yeah, my favorite voice to do was Gimpy on Undergrads, for those of you who are familiar with it. Like Mark was saying, he was the character that we saved for last when I was doing a voice record session, just because he just completely wreaked havoc on my throat. But he was my favorite to do, and it was essentially just
talking like this and ruining my voice for as long as I could stand it. Thank you, Star Wars. I saw undergrad. So yeah, let's see. I mean, obviously, favorite voices. Given the fact that Commander Shepard largely paid my mortgage, I would be remiss if I did not mention him. However, he's fairly close to my own voice, so yeah, it wasn't as fun, if you want to say it that way. The Vorcha, yeah, things like that, the Volus, all those aliens, they were a lot of fun. But as I mentioned, Vorcha voice. And so I wouldn't do that for a long period of time. Nifty Cal, like the Biotic God particularly, he was a lot of fun because again, my background is comedy, so getting to do comic relief characters within Mass Effect was always fun. Blasto was always a good time, and I was really pleased to see how popular Blasto became in his own right. That with the day that I picked up the Blasto comic book, that was quite fulfilling. Beyond that, I generally do prefer to do the sort of weird voices. And in Caution May Contain Nuts and Tiny Plastic Man, I do a lot of sketch comedy. So I get to play a lot of weird characters who do have odd voices. So yeah, I like all the voices. They're fun.
Where would you consider starting? Because I kind of do some acting now, but it's just basic theater stuff. Like right now, I was just casting out UQ, which is musical theater, in Toronto, and so.
That's great news.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm doing Mrs. Thistlepot as the old British woman.
I'm familiar with Mrs. Thistlepot's
Are
work.
you?
Yes.
And I'm feeling the bad idea bears. Let's all get wasted. And so I'm doing those two voices, and I'm just wondering, where do you get started with voice acting, and how can you audition for stuff like that? I've never seen anything online, or where to go for that.
Yeah, I mean, I am very fortunate. And then when people ask me, so how does one break into voice acting? I say, well, you should do what I do. Get in on the ground floor with BioWare in 1999. With the aid of this vortex manipulator, you should be able to, yeah. So that's the thing. I was lucky enough to be around when BioWare was still doing general auditions. But you never know when a company that might be BioWare in the future is going to just post a general audition. We want people to come in and do their voices. So. I came across it just because I was a young actor and I was going to every audition that I could. When you're an actor and that's what you do for a living, you're going to go to auditions for commercials and you'll audition for plays. And congratulations on getting out. Thank you, by the way. And you'll do radio bits. You'll do little bits on television.
You
So
do everything.
yeah.
But
So
you particularly love doing voice acting.
I do love doing voice acting.
That's your favorite?
Well, I enjoy all branches of acting. Ultimately, if you look at how much time I put in, it's voice acting is actually like a sliver of all the live improv stage stuff that I actually spend more time doing. It doesn't pay nearly as well as voice acting for BioWare, certainly. But yeah, you're gonna be doing a lot. So essentially, you're going to keep your eyes open and go to lots of auditions and do things. When people ask, how do I become a voice actor, I always say, well, step one is become an actor. And then step two, land a voice gig. And then you're a voice actor all of a sudden.
One more question, I'll stop talking.
Sure. We do have other people though.
I know, I talk a lot about, I love acting. So,
Yes.
So is it necessary to, if you're doing a voice audition, do you have to have a demo reel, or can you just go in and do stuff for them? How does that work?
Usually they're going to be looking for a reel these
Okay,
days.
yeah.
But again, sometimes I walked in off the street and recorded a few voices, and then I ended up getting cast in Baldur's Gate 2. And then they liked my work, so they just kept hiring me again.
Okay.
Also, it helped that I knew I played Dungeons and Dragons, so they could put me in the booth and say, this guy is a kobold shaman. And I wouldn't go, what's a kobold? What's a shaman? I just go, okay, he's chaotic evil. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, Mark. You said that your voice is slightly different than Commander Shepard's voice, and I want to know what kind of lines you really have to change your own personal voice to fit Shepard, and if there's any lines in the game you've repeated several times with, because they maybe as you go over it or something like that.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, Commander Shepard is essentially me trying to sound tough. as I mentioned before, Commander Shepard is a fairly unique character in that Shepard could be anything from a completely noble, selfless hero to a borderline psychopath who's utterly ruthless. So that was an interesting character to approach from that way. If you're asking if there's a line I said a lot,
Yeah.
I should go. And to Bioware's credit, they could have paid Jennifer and I to say that once and just reused it however many hundred times it gets said within the trilogy. But no, we said it a new time every time. They wanted it to have different flavor.
Awesome.
And it wasn't always I should go, sometimes it was I have to go. I should keep going. I better be going. Yeah, always.
My friend Alex, he can make it good, but he said that he wanted you to say your famous Commander Shepard, and Alex is my favorite person on the solo.
You got it. You set?
Yeah, let's go.
I'm Commander Shepard, and Alex is my favorite human on the Citadel. Maybe somebody who has a question.
This is for each of you. I don't know if it's been asked already, but is there any special methods that you do to warm up for when you do your voices?
I usually, well, first off, for me, hydration is important. I get like dried out very easily, and so like, you know, it's important to start the day with water. I find room temperature works better for me. I find if I drink really cold water, it can kind of tighten me up. But I just like, you know, depending on what I did the night before, and you know how to me, my voice, and maybe this isn't everybody else, but it's kind of like it starts out like a cold piece of gum in the fridge, and you gotta like slowly get it kind of warm and pliable, and like you know, steam is good, but like, you know, when I'm just doing silly like video game music lyric parody stuff, I'm not like, you know, breathing steam for like the diva moments. But like if I'm doing the concert, for instance, like I might start by humming and then start by like singing, and you know, just the long and short of it is it's a warm up, so just don't dive into it. If you really, you know, if you've been talking all day, you're probably pretty warm. It depends on what you're doing. If you're screaming, I think it's more about support technique than about being warm. Because how do you, I don't know, for me it's like warming up into a scream, you're gonna be freaking screaming, so like, anyway, somebody else talk, please, save me.
Yeah, I don't really have too much more to add, but the water thing, I remember for when I was recording undergrads was huge, and I didn't have any prior voice acting experience, at least not professionally, so the note I was always given was, you're sounding a little froggy there, Pete, why don't you take a big old gulp of water? And the water thing definitely helped, and the other thing, the warm-up, I found out that they just kept having me talk when they were testing levels at the beginning of a recording session, and it seemed like they were having me talk for a really long time, and it turns out they were just waiting for my voice to get warmed up without telling me to warm up my voice.
Yeah, I came to voice acting from theater, so of course we do a lot of vocal warm-ups and that, and there's, you know, all the hilarious things that if you go backstage you'll think that actors are insane or weird, but you know, things like all these various things, and yeah, you do, it does help, and it warms, you know, doing those specific things warms it up a lot quicker than just normal talking would. So if I've got a session, like say in the early afternoon, then yes, I will spend about, you know, 20 minutes, half an hour at home going red leather, yellow leather, red leather, yellow leather. And those little tongue twisters too, they just help, you know, warm up your mouth and lips and get you used to pronouncing words and things like that. The water thing is very important. I often like lemon ginger tea. If my voice is maybe feeling a little stressed, then I'll have some of that. Jennifer Hale, I know, swears by just straight up hot water. She always keeps like a big thermos of hot water in the booth with her. And yeah, hot water is better than cold water, certainly.
Could I just sort of like, I want to see what you guys think about this, because this is just my opinion, but do you find that with the voice specifically, sometimes something for one person just works, and it works for nobody else, but like if something works for you, like, and it's not specifically damaging you, do it. Like, I knew a guy that drank milk before he would sing, like sing, he was great, and he was like, swore by like warm milk, and they always say don't drink milk, don't drink, all these little things you're not supposed to do, but if it works for you, and again, as long as it's not like, I mean, you know, don't drink like hot acid, it's bad coffee. But generally, like if it works for you, I just find that the voice is one of those things that a lot of it's mental and a lot of it's very specific to your anatomy, so if it works for you, hang on to it.
Thanks.
Yes.
So working within the voice acting industry, you need a lot of voice actors. So, but my question is for all three of you, who would you say is your favorite voice actor? What would you say is your favorite voice actor in the industry?
That we've met, or just favorite voice?
In general.
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, when I was a kid, I was always like, and he's passed on now, of course, but Mel Blanc, of course, is legendary. I remember the moment when I was a kid when I figured out, like, wait a minute, he's Bugs Bunny, and he's Porky Pig, and he's Barney Rubble? It's like, finding out that he was all the Warner Brothers characters was impressive enough, but to find out that, he crossed universes and he was also guys in the Flintstones and things like that always blew my mind. I mean, Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill certainly are really up there on the strength of the Batman stuff. And yeah, Mark Hamill's probably one of my favorite, actually no, my favorite Joker, animated or not, like, even top sequence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You want to go?
We have two mics?
Oh, we do?
Yeah.
Is this one?
Test, so.
Okay. Crystal clear, CD quality. Billy West is my favorite. Because I had a similar thing with I had this revelation at some point, late teens, early 20s, where I didn't realize that so many animated shows have such tiny casts compared to the ensemble of characters. And then you start to go, oh, I kind of hear a little bit of Fry in Farnsworth, and I kind of hear a little bit of Farnsworth in, like Zoidberg, and realizing that it's all one freaking mouth,
Yeah,
And-
I'm very remiss not to mention. I just met him actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Is he crazy?
Yeah, a little crazy. Super nice guy. Super nice guy.
Every interview I see with him, he seems totally nice, super smiley, and nuts, yeah. But not dangerous nuts, but just a little bit okay, Billy, stop smiling. It's we're awake.
Smiles a lot.
Yeah. But yeah, Billy West, and I also shout out to Jim Cummings just because he's does a lot of cool stuff. Oh wait, Frank Welker too, because any animal you've heard in the last 50 years on TV or a movie is probably Frank Welker.
For me, and I'm probably not getting his last name right, but the guy that does the voice of Homer Simpson and pretty much all of the major characters on the show. Thank you. For me, growing up, he was the guy I want to be that guy because he does all of them. But for me, an actor that I actually got to work with was Rob Tinkler. He does pretty much anything that's on YTV these days, but he did the voice of Mump on the show and a million others, but the thing I loved most was when we had him do Chewbacca, because he does the most authentic Chewbacca growl I've ever heard, without any processing on it.
And I've got a long list, but I would be, again, remiss not to mention Jennifer Hale, the fact that I got to work with Jennifer Hale, as the other part of her character. She's on so many great shows. I was a fan of hers before I worked on Mass Effect, just on the strength of her DC animation work. And and Steve Bloom, of course, who is Wolverine and pretty much everyone else.
So in undergrads, Pete voiced a lot of people that characters based on people he knew. So do you find it's harder or easier to voice someone that you know in real life, or that exists in real life, or has sort of an established voice?
Well, you make a lot of enemies basing your voices on real people. But it's probably easier doing voices based on people you know, because chances are you've done that voice for a while. The voices that I came up with for undergrads were just horrible impressions that we all did of each other throughout high school, and they just kind of were burned in our brains. And so those were just, it was like breathing for me. That was not a whole lot of brain work went into that. I think having to invent a new character, based on a description that you're given or just even a visual is far more challenging.
Was that just for Peter? Do you want to extrapolate? I find that a lot of people don't realize how they sound. So if you could slightly exaggerate a voice that's based on a person, they will just go, that's really funny. They'll never ever realize it's based on you, dum-dum. This South African classmate of mine in grad school named Angelique, she was so nice, and she'd go get a chai tea, and how are you? I'm fine, and you? She was very, extremely, she was quite a character. But if you did her voice, she wouldn't know until we were like, we're doing the you. You know what I mean? So like, as long as you don't, it kind of comes down to how spot on you are. If you're like directly doing the exact same, like you could fool somebody on the phone, and the character's named that, maybe you know, like run the risk of like pissing them off or whatever. But if you just take it slightly out, you know, like make it a little bit larger, a lot of times I don't even know if they'll really even realize it.
Yeah, there's an old story, a Warner Brothers story actually, when they were developing Daffy Duck. They actually based it on a guy who worked at Warner Brothers. I mean, he had a lisp, and he sounded like Daffy Duck. And they were, you know, and he was actually like a fairly high up executive. And so they thought, this is hilarious. And then as they got closer and closer, and you know, went further along the process, they're like, oh, what if he's offended? Like he could fire all of us. What's going on? And so they were a little nervous, and so they finally showed him the footage. And then apparently, immediately afterwards, he was just really happy. He was like, that duck's hilarious, Helen. How'd you come up with the point?
I've never heard that.
Yeah, I've heard that one. Just talking about, you said, we were talking earlier about, you know, crappy impressions of people. Sometimes, you know, if your impression is crappy enough, it can be a whole new original character. Like, oh, I was trying to do Humphrey Bogart. Didn't sound like him at all. Sounded like a completely new character, original character. Yes. Blue shirt, yes. For the volunteer.
I came in a bit late, so I'm sorry if this question has been asked already, but for the three of you personally, what would have been a voice role that you guys would have loved to have personally do yourself?
Any, like, you know, wow. I've always been a huge fan of Dr. Victor von Doom. And he so rarely is given a proper Eastern European accent. So yeah, Dr. Doom. I would love to play Dr. Doom someday in a game or a cartoon or something like that.
Well, I mean, maybe you weren't here when I said this, so it'll be at least a surprise to you, but I've had this dream of like the Homestar Runner people being like, we want to bring the cartoon back, but we just don't want to do the voices, so we're going to audition people for the voice and rolling up being like, guys, I'm your Homestar one, okay? This is totally going to happen, I'm your Homestar. But as far as like voices from classics I would like to do, I don't know, like, I don't think I could pull off a good Joker, but it's the kind of thing, there's something holy grail about, I don't know, I mean, do you find that like, it's one of those roles like, it's a Hamlet of voice acting, like, and not everybody nailed, like, I mean, I feel like Mark Hamill versus like, I love John DiMaggio, but like, it would never hold a candle, I don't think, to Mark Hamill's, but it's still like, its own flavor, it's almost like your, I don't know, your take on it says a lot about you as a voice actor, and like, so, even though there's no universe in the multiverse where I'm going to do the voice of Joker, but man, it would be cool.
I know he's a beloved character, but I really would have loved to do the voice of Jar Jar Binks. And I probably would have changed his lines. I probably would have had him say, "Oh no, he's dead now. I can't ruin the movie."
We have one question over here.
Kind of leading off to that question, is there any voices that you love and you wish you could do, but you just can't do it? You tried, but it's never worked out. You just really want to do it, but you can't.
You mean that we'd auditioned for and missed?
No, not necessarily. Like on your free time, you just want to master a voice that you really love. And want,
Or one that's just like outside of our range?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. No, I can do all the voices I want to. If I'm not good at it, I don't like it. That's my rule in life. I'll let you.
Well, my dad does a kick-ass Daffy Duck, and it's one of those anatomical things of like, I'm sure, you know, with a year of intense training, I could figure it out, but it's really just a matter of like getting the air to pass through your cheek in this kind of weird way and making a voice out of it. But man, I would like give a lot of money to nail a Donald Duck. So yeah.
A voice that I've just completely failed at doing ever since trying. I really want to do it was Winnie the Pooh, and I've done Winnie the Pooh, and I've told my sister, here's my horrible Winnie the Pooh impression, and she said, seriously, that's it? It's that bad. But the voice that I've actually really wanted to actually perfect and try to do is Wallace Shawn.
Oh, yeah.
Just because he's got a great natural voice, and it's really hard to do Wallace Shawn. But he's like the only
You guys
character.
know who that is, right? Vicinity from
Inconceivable.
But he's I think the only voice I've ever actually spent time trying to do, like while I'm home alone, and which is sad. But so it's not like a button or a peanut. This is a major electrical appliance.
Oh my god! That's really good.
I've always wanted to do a German accent, but no. Yes.
So someone like me who doesn't know anyone in the industry, starting off, how necessary is it that I have an agent or like a unit or something like that?
It's probably a good idea to have an agent. Again, I didn't when I started out, but things have changed in the many decades since. For one thing, it will help you get auditions, and you will find out about auditions that you might not otherwise. Now, you guys are both based in Toronto, or
In New York City.
in New York City. New York City. You're based.
I'm in Toronto.
You're based in larger centers than, say, Edmonton. So perhaps you guys can speak to this a little better.
Well, you know, I feel like, so as we established before Mark got here, when we were like treading water in tap shoes.
When you were on time.
Yeah, well, that's what I meant. You know, I feel like, so here I am as a person who is making a living using my voice outside of any of the mechanisms that would count as voice actor. Like I had this weird phase as a kid where I did a couple of, like, they called me Meat Boy before Super Meat Boy was a thing. Between ages 7 and 9, this is not a joke, I actually did like 5 or 6. I was like a child commercial and industrial film actor. But then I hit puberty, just wasn't so cute anymore. But I did like the, you know, like the Butterball commercials and the like, wow, this cheese is great, you know, like I'm 9 or whatever. So I had an agent then, and that was neat. I have no idea how that works because I was 9 and not paying attention. But the thing is, like, I just want to offer that while there is a machine, and they're not a machine, but there are ways to go about being a voice actor. The internet has made kind of a million doors in, and you just have to do a thing that people give enough of a crap about that, you know what I mean? Like I'm not a voice actor. Why am I on this panel? Well, because I get paid to use my voice, but I'm not a voice actor, you know what I mean? And so what I'm getting at is, the Homestar Runner, I know I keep going back to this, but like those guys made a lot of money by creating characters and using voices, creating voices that were not there before on the internet. They kind of paved their own way. And so all I'm saying is, getting an agent if you want to be a voice actor is absolutely important, unless you find another way. So that all I'm saying is, you know, if you have something you want to write, something you want to express, some friend that needs voice acting or needs some kind of acting like that, and they want to, you know, you want to make a web series, you want to make a this or that, go for it. Because at some point, and I don't know if we're doing PG panels during the day, so I'm just going to use this word, but balls is really ultimately one of the most important things. Not aggressive, pushy, being a jerk balls, just kind of like, oh, you can say balls.
Yeah, okay, good, yeah. Yeah, this is what I mean, yeah. But
nutsack, we'd have a problem.
True. Damn that distinction.
No, nutsack has other connotations.
That's true. Yeah, just slung over my back. We all went there. All I'm saying is that while there are certainly ways to go about it, there are many ways with the democratization of the internet has afforded us, like to do a thing you want to do with an avenue that's somewhat unconventional. So I would just say, don't discount that if that sounds like a way you'd like to also supplement, you know, your career or your path.
And that would help you get an agent, because it just takes that one thing that you can point to and say, I did this. Even if it's not something on television, but like you say, there are gateways on the internet that, just that one thing that you can identify yourself with, an agent might be interested, and then you can send the reel. But I doubt agents are going to like you just sending, you know, they've got a million reels to go through, you know, so what makes you stand out? So finding a different avenue. Create your own TV series, that works.
Yeah.
You mentioned that Dungeons & Dragons gave you an advantage when voice acting. Have you ever snuck a player character voice into any productions you worked in?
Oh, certainly. Like most of the accents that I can do, I developed in high school and junior high playing Dungeons and Dragons. And in fact, Dungeons and Dragons was my first acting experience. I went to school in a small town. We didn't have a drama program at all. We didn't have an art program. I take art by correspondence. It's hard to take drama by correspondence. And so, yeah, Dungeons and Dragons was sort of like my gateway into improv and acting. And you know, there were some accents that I had refined and certain voices that I had refined through DMing. Mostly it would be through DMing, because then you're going to play like a bunch of different characters. So it served me in good stead when I did become an actor. Yes.
Okay, so when you're recording lines for like a dialogue scene, do you actually get to hear like the other side of the dialogue? Is it just placeholder, or do they say use that line?
It's going to depend on the project and the company that you're working for. BioWare, for example, uses a system called VADER. And the acronym for the machine actually spells V-A-D-E-R, Vader. But apparently they can't use that because someone has that copyrighted. So it's actually called VADER. And so basically you've got the other person's performance in your headset as you're doing the scene. Now that is contingent on them having recorded already. So if you're the first person to record a scene, you kind of have the advantage of setting the tone and everyone else follows you. But say it's a large scene with several people and you're the last person to record, it is like being in the room with, you know, like say, you know, put on the headset and it's like, oh man, Keith David is here in the booth with me doing a scene. And so that was always really fun. And like, you know, who's going to be in the booth today? Oh, it's Lance Henriksen. Excellent. And that was fun. We also moved from paper to a screen. Like the very first Mass Effect game, we killed a small forest easily because there was always like a stack of scripts like that in the recycle bin. And when we moved to Beta, it also comes on a screen, so basically your lines pop up on the screen in the booth as you hear the other person feeding you the cue line. So yeah, that helps with the performance. It makes it a little more organic. Obviously, the best thing is to have everybody in a room together, you know, Simpsons style, where you're actually playing off each other and you've got the other actors present. But this is the next best thing.
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so I recently did this video project that involved me doing lots of songs, and so many of them for like two weeks in a row that I will watch them, and like it was like a Kickstarter thank you thing. I will watch some of these little projects that I made, like one right after the other for days and days, and not remember the process of making them, and maybe this is applicable to like making a TV show with all the lines. Do you ever have a moment where you're watching this thing you were a part of, and just, what does it feel like when and if you have no recollection of performing this one thing, or do you remember each one specifically?
Yeah, in my case with Mass Effect, it's like, you know, I don't have a photographic memory or anything, but playing Mass Effect for me, when I did my actual playthroughs, it was a very unique experience. I always compare it to like being Dr. Manhattan. Like just like, oh, yeah. You know, I'll start a mission like, oh, it's this one. I remember everything that could possibly happen. I guess I'll go through it. I'm a puppet who can see the strings. Yeah. And so yeah, it was a kind of unique experience for me playing Mass Effect. It's way more fun for me to play something like Dragon Age, where I'm, you know, just random monsters and villains where I can sort of like discover myself and like, oh hey, I found me. I killed me. So yeah, it's I would tend to remember as it happened. It wouldn't just be as I'd walk in with like complete knowledge of the game, but like as things were happening, would just trigger the memories. Like, oh yeah, I remember that day. I had a sandwich. It was good. I went for a smoke right after I did this line.
You don't smoke. No, I can't say I really have memories of the process. I mean, I remember what we did, but if I hear a line or a take, just because so much time had passed from when the show was produced, I think it was about 5 years where I just had not seen an episode, and suddenly it was on Teletoon, and I caught an episode. I was like, oh, the guy that did that cow voice, that's a really brilliant read right there.
I know it doesn't happen often, but do you prefer working with other people when you're doing voice work or singing, or do you like working alone?
I generally prefer collaboration where possible. And it's always more fun. It's like, you know, solitary. Some people prefer a solitary experience, and you know, some, for example, stand-ups, for example, like don't like working with other people. Some of them, but yeah, I've always preferred collaboration. So where possible, I'd like to work with other people.
Yeah, no, same here. Unfortunately, we didn't have the opportunity on undergrads. Everybody was recorded separately. But there was one instance where we did have one of the actors in the studio, and I think they wanted to film a behind the scenes thing, so they did put us both in the same room. And you just get a better rhythm for a scene because you're playing off of the other person instead of guessing how the other person was going to read their lines. So definitely that collaboration, you don't get that when you're in a booth by yourself.
So I'm the dude who's going to say that I disagree with those two guys. Not disagree in that I think they're wrong, but I'm the guy they were talking about, the solo guy. But for me, so I recently in the last year have actually, a friend of mine constructed a kind of a ramshackle booth with sound foam in it, and it's got a door, so you can actually, in my apartment, go into a room, turn on a work light, and be in a isolated space. It's really cool, but now I'm able to, like, as I do voices, like I do different music styles. I did Irish punk earlier this year, so I got to really like, the first demo was very piratey, and then I went like, okay, it's not pirate, it's supposed to be like Moxie Frubus or like, you know, what's that other one, you know what I'm talking about, Dropkick Murphys, there we go, that kind of thing. And I was able to figure it out as I went. And for me, having someone else there while I'm figuring my stuff out is like having someone else there when you're like dancing to a great song in your underwear in your bedroom. You know what I mean? Like, it's very vulnerable. It's not something you want. And like, for me, I'm sure this at some point is true of all voice actors, but I don't know. I haven't really seen a lot of this from other people, but like, I will use the space that I'm in and lean against it, or sometimes it just like, maybe it's just a lack of training, but like sometimes I find the physicality of the character by making these weird body shapes or whatever, just to get it out the way that, you know, like it comes out of me. So for me, having someone there, like even when I recorded albums with my sound engineer, he would face the other way, just because I didn't want him to be looking at how ridiculous I looked doing all this stuff. For me, it felt better to kind of like assume that I was just in space, you know, by myself, isolated, and make the sound happen. So that's my perspective. The end.
The end. Yes.
I was just wondering, I guess this has changed depending on who you work for, but how much freedom do you generally get when you create your own voice? When sort of somebody might come in and say, I have this character, this is what they look like, this is what they're going to do, this is the world they live in, you kind of have to follow that. How much freedom do you generally get to do a voice when somebody says, yeah, we really don't know what this guy's going to look like. Why don't you give us some lines? Let's see what we come up with.
Sometimes you might record even different versions, depending on how many lines there are. And you know, if you're really on the wrong track, then your director is probably going to go, yeah, no, let's try that again. Let's try a different tack on that. In Dragon Age, for example, I don't know if everyone's played Dragon Age 2, but there's a character I play called Jathan, who is a male elf prostitute. Who's in the bordello. And he's somewhat flamboyant. And so I actually did like 2 complete run-throughs of his lines. One was the version that you do here in the game. And then I managed to convince my director anyway, to let me do one pass on his lines as Paul Lind. I don't know if you know that. Paul Lind, that guy. If you're old enough, you might remember him from Hollywood Squares.
Do you find that Roger on American Dad is a Paul Lind?
Yeah. Roger, especially in the early days, he was much more Paul Lind. And now that whole thing of like now he's become his own character.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
He's moved a little away from Paul Lind.
I love that Paul Lind thing.
Yeah. So and I played Paul Lind like in 50-hour improv shows and things like that. So yeah, all last season at Dynasty, the improvised soap opera, Paul Lind was my character. So yeah, I think Paul Lind's hilarious. And so I managed to convince my director Caroline to let me do a whole, because Jathan didn't have like a ton of lines. So she let me do a whole pass on him as Paul Lind, and I was just like, oh, let Paul Lind be in the game. And ultimately it was decided that might be a little much. That might, Jathan, even as he is, he's fairly a fairly comic character, but that might have been a little too jarring. So yeah, sometimes you might even get to record your hilarious idea that you think is hilarious, but it won't necessarily make it into the final project. And Joe?
I don't know if that question applies to me enough for me to intelligently speak on it, so I think you covered it. Do you have something?
I just have one anecdote, just because I was sort of a director of the other voice actors on the show for undergrads, but there are instances where your actor just doesn't give you what you want, and it's hard to try to get them where they need to be, and sometimes you just don't get it. And we just had one example where we actually had to just cut a line completely just because we couldn't get the read that we needed. And there was a line from I think it was the first episode, and there was a Star Wars reference where Gimpy's quoting C-3PO's line where he says, "I've killed them, R2!" And it was supposed to quickly cut away to this little French student who says, "I told you, stupid American, my name is Artois, Artois!" And the guy that we had doing the French line, he was doing this very beautiful, perfect French accent. But because he was doing it so eloquently, it was stretched out. It was, "I told you, stupid American, my name is Artois, Artois." And it was too long. It was supposed to be just a quick cutaway gag. We kept saying, "All right, can you make him a little more obnoxious and quicker, quicker, quicker?" "Absolutely. Stupid American." And it was just like, oh. All right, we're cutting the line.
Yes. Oh, sorry. No, I don't know why we're both driving. That's moderate. You moderate. Oh, thank you. No, you're the middle. Well, all right, you. Okay, first you.
Oh, okay. I was wondering, especially you, because you actually wrote the script, how do you guys feel about ad-libbing, and how is it when you're recording? Especially with the beta system, ad-libbing seems to be kind of, is that difficult? Does that ever come up where you ever came up with like a great line on the fly and kind of surprised everyone?
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely. There was a character on the show, Rob Brody, who was sort of the film connoisseur, and he would just go on these rants. And the actor who played him, Josh Kagan, was also one of the writers on the show. And whenever it came to a Rob Brody rant, it just said in the script, "Josh Kagan riffs." And it was just him getting in front of the mic and talking. And some of the funnier lines that Rob Brody says they were never in a script. It was just Josh Kagan. "I watched the movie good." Like that just came from Josh's brain as we were recording. And I think we did that a couple of times with some other characters where they didn't know they were still recording, and they were commenting on something that happened in the script. It was like, "We're really doing this?" And we found that funny. That's funny if the character says, "Are we really doing this?" So we left it in. But yeah, I mean, I think every now and then, an ad lib happens in the spur of the moment that a writer, while they're just sitting in their room, could never have come up with, and it just adds this other flavor.
As an improviser, I'm a big fan of ad-libbing. However, especially in Mass Effect, it was a little difficult to do because not only was there a script and any changes would have to be approved or anything, and also you have to keep in mind that Jennifer Hale was saying all the same lines. So if, for example, I was doing a scene that she'd already recorded, like if I deviated from the script, then they'd have to bring her back in and re-record her. And vice versa. So she had to stick to the script as well. That said, they were willing to say, if you were recording it first, change the wording like this. This sentence is a bit of a mouthful to say. It's easy to type this, but harder to say it. They would let us change things like that. But for the most part, we had to stick to the script. And I believe you, sir, have the honor of the last question.
Right.
Yes.
All right. So you said that when you work together with a bunch of people, it's more fun. Like your reply to let's say the last guy that did the voice. The next lines, but easier. But for someone like you, who does character Hal, how do you manage that same flow of energy to make it equal? Now, that's just, or do you just have?
Well, I'm lucky that I have a split personality, so it's just very easy to sort of backtrack. But it was a little difficult with undergrads because I would just record one character at a time and record all of Mrs. lines for an episode, and then move on to Rocco and all Rocco's lines. But you just kind of have to, use a little imagination or try to remember. It was lucky that I was one of the writers on the show that I knew the gist of what was supposed to be happening, so it wasn't that difficult to put myself back in the moment of how Rocco would have said that line, because I knew how Rocco was going to say that line when we wrote it. But I think if I was just an actor coming into the show and I had to do it that way, it might have been a little bit trickier. But I mean, Mark, maybe you can speak to that better.
Yeah, I mean, there were several scenes in Mass Effect where I was talking to myself. The Bionic God scenes, for example, like any scene where Shepard's talking to a Vorcha or Blasto or things like that, that was me talking to myself. However, they recorded me separately. So usually I'd record Shepard's line and then they'd put it into beta, and then I'd hear myself in my headphones as I did it. That said, there's other projects I've worked on. Like I do a TV show called Tiny Plastic Men on Super Channel, and we just shot the second season. In the second season, there's an episode where a bunch of evil duplicates of our characters show up from an evil foreign country called Latvania. And so I was shooting with a body double, my my scene, the scene where my two different characters were interacting with each other. And the body double didn't actually know the lines, and so I was just running through the whole scene like, "May I have your copy of the Necronomicon?" It's a Latin translation by Elias Wormius. "I prefer the original Greek," and I'm just running through it. So anyone who walked in the room would have assumed I was insane. And I believe that is all the time we have, gentlemen. Yes, so these fine folks.